Greetings, programmers! Busted Thumbs back again. We're into our third installment now in learning how to scratch for beginners. In our last installment, we talked about variables. We talked about what they are, how they apply to our program or to our sprites, and we started to work with them just a little bit. In this third tutorial, what we're going to focus on is building on what we learned about variables and throwing in a little bit of the command blocks that come along with being able to move a sprite about and to do some interesting things with that. After this one, I think we'll go on to more user interaction, but for right now, we're going to have a very kind of scripted look about our particular program. And I've kind of thought of the way we're going to go with this particular program. It's not a game or anything interesting that you would use after you learn how to do Scratch, but we're going to have a little bit of a theme for this particular tutorial. And I think it's going to be that our cat, Domingo, our wonderful cat, is going to be a runner. And he's going to start running some laps for us. And that's definitely going to show off motion. And we're going to have to keep track of how many laps he's going to do. So the very first thing I'd like to do in this particular installment is to make one more variable and show you something interesting about variables. So we're going to make another variable for this sprite, and I'm going to call that number of laps. So far we've been working with text inside of our sprites. I'm going to put this guy, you can see you can drag these to a different spot. This is now going to be our interesting one, so I'm going to go ahead and hide name and nickname. They're not going to change too much, but I'm going to put number of laps in there. See there, I'm kind of centering him right in the middle of the program. We have so far been working with text. Name and nickname have been strings, and that's what they are. This text, we call them in programming terms, we call them strings. But in this case, we're going to start working with numbers. So a number of laps is set to 0 to begin with, and that's actually correct. That's what we want it to be. He's not done any work yet. He hasn't run at all, and so it should be at 0. Now, so far we've been using the set block, but I would like to actually, in this case, now use the change block. So I'm going to say that when we start our program, he's going to go ahead and run back and forth across the screen, and when that happens, we should change the number of laps by 1. So let's see what that does. When I pop this guy up here and I click run, you can see that that 0 became 1, right? And I can stop the program and I run it again, and 1 became 2, and I do it again, and 2 became 3, and so on and so forth. So running our program basically changes number of laps by 1. It adds 1. It increases it by 1, which is great. The unfortunate thing about this is every time we start our program is that we'd really like that his number of laps start at 0, and then it's what he does in the program that actually changes the number of laps. So a very common pattern that we have inside of Scratch is to make sure that we set all of our variables all at the beginning to be what we want them to be. And that what I call initialization step. So we've set the name, the nickname, and the number of laps to what it should be. And then we do the thing that's interesting and we change it by 1. So you'll see if I bring this up again, it's still set to 3. When I click play, it's going to become 1. And what it's really going to do, like we said, we walk through here, it's going to become 0 and then it's going to become 1. But the computer's going to do it so fast that we're never going to see that 0. It's just going to appear as 1. And you'll see that if I click on this flag, boom, that's exactly what happens. So when it started up, it did its initialization set. It set the things to what it should be, and then it did its kind of logic step. It did the things that it should do as part of a program and changed it by 1. The way I like to make that a little bit easier to manage is in this dark purple thing over here, which says more blocks. And this thing is completely empty, and the reason why it's completely empty is it's reserved for the things that are your blocks, only the things that you do. And so in almost every program that I write, I come down and I create a new block which is initialize. And let's call it Initialize Variables to be clear. So you can go ahead and type right into that guy that pops up there, and there's some options here, but we don't need to worry about those right now. And we click OK, and now look, there's this new block in there called Initialize Variables, and this thing has shown up over on our screen here that's blocking my program that we can put over. It looks kind of like an event. It's got a little place where we can hang code. Well, what I'm going to do now is get rid of this guy and take all my sets that begin at the start of my program, and I'm going to stick them under here. and then I'm going to drag my block and put it in the when the green flag is clicked. And did you notice that when I clicked on one of these things, one of these blocks, that everything underneath it came with it? So you'll see that if I grab that one, it takes the ones underneath it, and I took the bottom one out so that I wouldn't drag it over. I just took the top one, and then I go ahead and snap it right in to where it's going to be over there. And now what this means is when the green flag is clicked, the very first thing it's going to do is initialize variables, which means it needs to come over to this guy and walk down 1, 2, 3, do those 3 things, and then I can put this guy back in, and it will now go into the running of the program. And I can show you that this does exactly the same thing as it was doing before. And in this case, 1 is still going to become 1 because it's going to set it to 0 before changing it to 1. And boom, that happens. Now another little handy trick that we can use, remember we set it to 0 and we couldn't see that it changed. Sometimes you just want to see how everything works. So inside of this control block, don't worry about these other things, but at the very top there's a wait. I'm going to bring that wait over, and I'm going to pop him right in between these two. I'm going to say wait 1 second. So it'll go through, it'll do these 3 steps, it'll come back through, come to here, it'll say wait 1 second, and we'll just wait for a little bit, and then it will change the number of laps by 1. And this will allow us to see that it was set to 0 first and then changed to 1. So I go ahead and come over here, I'll hit play, it's 0, and then it's 1, right? So it did do all of the steps, even though we couldn't see it before. And this block is handy just anytime you're not sure if everything you tried to put in was actually happening. You can just pop that guy in and see if the variables were changing the way you wanted them to. Okay. All right, so we were going to talk about motion. So let's talk about motion. We are now in the blue set of categories, which is the motion set of categories. And let's do some of our interesting logic. He's going to actually have to do his lap before he gets counted for a lap. So let's go ahead and grab the move block and stick him in there. And you can see that our scratch cat is kind of facing towards the right here, and that's what that direction variable was talking about. 90 degrees is to the right. So that's the way he's facing. And when we tell him to move, that means he's going to move in the direction that he's facing, and he's going to move a certain number of steps. And the steps will correspond to the number of pixels, the number of X positions over he's going to go. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it a little more dramatically as he moves. I'm going to turn it into 50 steps, and then once he's moved his 50 steps, then we're going to change his number of laps. So let's go ahead and run that. There he is sitting right there, and when I click on the green flag, he jumped over to the right a bit, and then my number of laps went up. If I do it again, he's going to keep jumping over to the right, just like that. Well, that's great. This is progress. Something's happening in our program now. It's not just those variables. We can do a lot more than this. Just like we initialized our variables, we probably want to initialize the rest of our program as it's going in, which means we need to be setting the X position to what we want it to be for our particular cat. And one way to do that is to create new variables that say where we would like that cat to be. So let's do that. We're gonna call his starting X position a variable, starting X. We're going to make another one is starting Y. And that needs to be for this sprite only. It's about this guy. It's not about anybody else, both of those. But we don't need those to necessarily show up. When we do that, we need to set what those values are going to be. And we had them right around here, which if you look on the screen, that said his position is about -181 and Y is -112. We can round those up a little bit. So I'm going to pop in the starting X and the starting Y. Starting X will make -180, and starting Y will just make -110. Okay? Those only set those variables. They didn't actually change the position of our sprite. It has no idea that starting X means the X position of our sprite. So after we set the position inside of our initialized variables, what we need to do is run our program so that we actually move the cat to be exactly where Domingo, where he should be. And that is done with this right here. There's a go to X and Y. Now, so far, the way we've been doing anything inside Scratch, when those white little places are, we've just been typing in the values that we want. Now we're going to actually use our variables inside of Scratch. And the way that that's done is, again, by dragging and dropping. Here's our variables, right? Our starting x and our starting y. We want those to be inside here. And what we do is we just go ahead and grab starting x, drag him in next to the x position, and we take starting y and drag him into the y position. And now those kind of round rectangles are showing up where we used to type things, which means when our program runs, it will initialize the variables setting x to minus 180 and y to minus 110, and then it will actually move our Scratch cat to the starting x and starting y. Then he'll move his 50 steps, and then he'll call it that a lap and change the number of laps by 1. So how is this different? Let's run it. There he is in his position. We're going to hit play, and he's going to, boom, be in that position. Now when we hit the green arrow flag before, he would go 50 steps from where he was. In this case, he's not going to. He's going to move back and then jump ahead. And you'll see that if I click this green flag, he's at the exact same space, which is what we wanted. It's exactly what we wanted. You said, well, why isn't he back there to begin with? Well, he moved so fast that we never got to see him actually get to that position. So in a program, you kind of want to animate. You want it to look like he's really moving. So we don't necessarily just want to just instantaneously become at 50 steps ahead. What we really would like to do is have him kind of glide over. And there's a block just for that. So we're going to get rid of move. Move we're done with. And we're going to say instead he's going to take a little bit of time to go from one position to another. So what we really need now is another couple of variables, which is his ending x and his ending y. Let's make those really quick for this sprite. Ending x. Okay. And one more for this sprite. Ending y. Okay. Now, of course, we're going to have to initialize those just like we did with the starting ones. So ending x. Let's make it on the other side of the screen. So let's call that 110. It was just negative 110s to the left, 110s to the right. And we'd really like that ending y to be the same as the starting y. So there's no reason to have to type that in. We can just go ahead and drag the starting y into the ending y, and it will be set to the right thing. Now we can go and say our glide, which is going to, well, we'll increase that a little bit. We'll call it 2 seconds, just so you can see it a little bit better. We'll go from where it is now, which it was already at starting x and starting y, and he will glide over to ending x and ending y. And now you see that that guy kind of popped in behind, so we can just drag that guy over really easily without changing anything. All right, so now he's going to glide from where he started over to the right. Let's watch that happen. Click on the green flag. And he actually glided backwards. Starting x. Oh, you can see I made a little mistake there. That is not supposed to be starting x, that's supposed to be ending x. Let's go ahead and try that again. There he is. He moved all the way across the screen to that other position right there. And the number of laps changed. Now you'll actually see that number of laps is 0 until he actually finishes getting there. So that's great. We are now, instead of having to use that wait, we see our initialization step happening of 0, and it's only once he kind of gets to the other end that it changes the number of laps. A lap isn't really going one way, it's coming there and back though, isn't it? So let's go ahead and make this again. Now here's a little trick. If you right click on a block, you can duplicate it. So we go ahead and select duplicate, and there we're going to glide again. But this time we don't want to go to the ending x. We want to go back from where we were in the ending x and come back to the starting position again. So starting x and starting y, and that's when we're going to call it a lap. There you go. So let's watch that happen. He's going to start at x and y, go to ending x and y, and glide back again. And then it'll be a lap. There he goes. He's running back and forth. And lap goes to 1. All right, so that's going to get a little bit slow. Let's change that to happen over 1 second, not 21 seconds, 1 second. And We do want to keep track of the number of laps, and it's a little not that interesting to see just one. So I'm going to show you one more block before we're done with this particular segment. It's inside control, and it's the repeat block. Now this guy looks a little bit different from the others we've seen so far in that he looks a bit like a C instead of just a little line. Looks like a C, and that's because things can fit inside of him. So I'm going to take all that stuff that we did there for gliding, and I'm going to stick him inside that one and pop that in there. So he snaps right in just like the others, but what he's saying now is that he's going to come in and do the things inside of him, and you see that arrow, it means go back up to the top of the C and do it again. And it's going to do that 10 times in this particular case. I'll make it a little fewer by typing in 5 instead. Now what that means is he's going to glide to the right, glide to the left, and then change the number of laps by 1, and then do it all over again. So what we should see when we're all done with this is a cat that goes back and forth and back and forth. And you know that X, it seems like he could go a little further. Let's make him a little bigger, 140. He'll go back and forth, and he'll do that 5 times. Each time the number of laps should change by 1. Let's see that in action. 1, change to 1, back, change to 2, back, change to 3, back, change to 4, and now he's done his 5th and final lap. So there we have it. We have some control flow that involves looping, which is this repeat. We have variables built into our motion blocks, and we're changing our variables as well. Now we've done a lot more interesting things in this particular segment, and this might be a time where you might want to start experimenting on your own. So far, the amount of change that happened when we clicked the play button, the green flag button, wasn't all that interesting. But I think now you have some building blocks where you could go off and experiment and have your sprite do whatever it is you want it to do and do some interesting things. We're going to build on this in the next one to actually kind of have some of the user interaction when the user clicks around on the screen to do some even more interesting things that's not quite so static and scripted. But this is a good spot to go back and take some time and experiment. I hope you've learned some interesting things as you've seen these first 3 tutorials. We have a few more before I'm ready to say just go off and be loose to create whatever program you want. There's still a few more things we can learn before doing that. But you can experiment with the things we've learned so far and do some interesting things. Hope you've enjoyed this recording. We'll get back to you in the next one, and see you then. Bye-bye.